chicks are about 6.5 weeks old now, and you can see that they're a lot more dispersed. They're not kind of sticking quite so close to mum, and you can also hear that Karen has stopped that kind of constant chick 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 noise which keeps them all together. So the chicks are just kind of starting to do their own thing, becoming a bit more independent. They're not constantly surrounding Karen. You can see too that the chicks are all fully feathered now. They've got all their little plumage, and I thought the white one was a cockerel, but I'm not entirely sure now. That one there is definitely a rooster, as is the other one, white one over there. But I think the two little brown ones are girls. We'll have to wait and see. Still keeping an eye on me though. So what I'll start to do now is I'll give Karen the option of staying in with the chicks, or the chicks being in the coop on their own, and I might let her have a bit of time in the run with Ralph and his two, and give the chicks a bit of a time on their own. But you can see they're much more dispersed than they were even a week or so ago. But Karen will probably molt, as it's quite common for them to molt after they've been broody. But yeah, she'll soon be back with Ralph in the large coop. I think she wants to lay an egg. Chick's a bit confused by this weird behaviour from mum. This is the coop where lots of them like to lay eggs. Ralph. And Karen has just disappeared up into there. So I think she might be wanting to lay. Ralph certainly thinks there's something worth waiting for. Out again. Make up your mind, Karen. There we go, one of those eggs actually belongs to Karen. So she's back laying, which is another sign that she's ready to kind of basically wean the chicks. It's amazing just how much greenery chickens will eat. Just let the chicks out for a bit of late night grazing before they roost. Karen's still with them, but she doesn't like them very much, as you can tell. But they still want to be with her, even though she keeps trying to chase them away. But she doesn't know where else she wants to be. So it's always a bit tricky when you're kind of weaning the chicks, because she doesn't want to be with the chicks, but the chicks want to be with her. But she doesn't really want to be in with anybody else either, because she's just kind of recovering a bit from the ordeal. Bit out of sorts, aren't you, love? So Karen has voted with her feet and is now in there with Ralph. And the chicks are going to have their first night on their own. Rather plaintive little cheeping. But they'll be fine. Here's Karen back with her chums. And there are the chicks. It's a bit rainy today, so they're just sheltering under the bay tree. But they're completely fine. They're not cheeping. So, all a pretty smooth process. This chick is a rooster. You can tell that because his wattles under his chin have started to develop, and also they're just a bit sort of beefier than the hen chicks. He's going to be a handsome fella, like his dad. Here's my starter. It's got some nice bubbles going on there. Can't really see with the glare, but that's what we want it to look like. And it needs to be nice and spongy and mousse-like, as in that's mousse, not mousse. So I'm going to measure out my water first, and I need 350 grams of water. Now this is recently, well, it's really quite cold water, but I need 350 grams. That's there. It goes in my bowl. Then I need 100 grams starter. There we go. Perfect. Then I'm going to put the starter in the water and then whisk it. So what this does is it kind of incorporates lots of air into the liquid, which you want to kind of encourage the microbial growth just by sort of really giving it a good old whisk. Now I'm going to weigh out my flour. I'm making just a plain white sourdough, but I always put a bit of rye in with mine. Rye flour is very low in gluten, but it's got lots of anti-inflammatories and it makes quite a sort of nice nutty flavour to the loaf. Not as much as with the wholemeal flour, but it's just adds a slightly sour note, I suppose, but it sort of also brings that depth of flavour which you don't get if you just use white flour. So I'm going to use just kind of a spoonful, which is about just over 50 grams of white flour, rye flour. Then I'm going to make it up to 500 with strong white, and this is from Shipton Mill. I buy it in a big sack. Which thankfully seems available now. There we go. Gonna put that in and just use my scraper to just mix it round to make a sort of shaggy mixture. There we go. Here we are. This is just the mixture, and this just gives a chance for the liquid to soak into the flour a little bit and start getting all the starch molecules ready to work, and it allows the bacteria in the starter to start kind of chatting with the carbs and enzymes and everything in the flour, so it just kind of gets the whole sourdough conversation going. It's had about 10 minutes and I'm now going to put the salt in. The reason we don't put the salt in straight away is because it kind of slows down all the bacterial activity, so we don't really want to get it all going and then immediately cut it off. So it's best to let just the starter mix with the flour for a bit first, but then you do need to put the salt in because that's what starts helping the gluten structure to be created and make that lovely web of strands which holds the air pockets, which then makes a nice loaf. So now I'm going to add the salt. Recipe says 10 grams, I use 9, just to reduce the salt a tiny bit. You can't reduce it down too much, otherwise it won't taste nice and you lose the integrity of the loaf. Sprinkle that in. And just chop it around. This is the action. You're just sort of folding in on itself and using the scraper to just kind of move it around. You can use your hands for this, of course, but I don't really like getting my hands all sticky. Scrape round the sides of the bowl. and scrape off the scraper. It's had about 10 minutes, so I'm now going to give it its first fold. So I'm just going to wet my hands with some water and then just go around and lift the dough up. I'm just going to slightly stretch it and sort of fold it back on itself. And make it into a nice ball. It's had another 10 minutes. So again, put my hand, sprinkle the water on. Now what I'm trying to do is keep this surface on the top. So as I twist it round, I want to stretch this top layer there, which I know at the moment is the bottom, but I want to try and keep it nice and smooth. Then I can turn it up the correct way, like that. Cover it again. My cat really loves sourdough. Last time, before we leave it for half an hour or so, just to settle. It's the next morning and I've got the sourdough out of the fridge where it's been overnight. I've got my cloche here, which I'm going to put in the oven to heat up. I can't really talk very much about the what I was doing last night because the film was on, but I dusted the banneton with rye flour and I also put some rye flakes on the base so that they'll kind of end up being the top. So I'm now going to leave all this to heat up. This is a lame, so it's basically like a sort of a razor blade set into a handle, and this slashes the loaf. Not many knives, unless you've got a sort of brand new knife or it's been very recently sharpened, will have the kind of wherewithal to cut through these sort of skin of the dough with enough precision to make a nice and neat cut. But so this is a lame, but you can use just a regular scalpel or just a razor blade, but it is quite important to get that rather than just a sort of a slightly blunt kitchen knife, otherwise it'll tear the dough and you won't get a nice split. So here we are. I'm just going to tip sourdough out, slash around the edge. I've got flakes on the top here, so I can't slash it all over. And then I'm going to pop the lid on. And pop it into the oven. The loaf has had about 45 minutes. Because it's been in the fridge, I'd normally give it 40 minutes in a hot oven, so kind of 200 degrees C. I'd normally give it 40, but as it's been in the fridge, I've given it a few, another sort of 5, maybe 10 minutes. So I'm about ready to take it out. There we go. There's my loaf. And actually it's quite nice and brown. Normally I put it in for a little bit longer just to really crisp up the top, but I'm going to leave this one as it is because my daughters don't like it terribly toasted. So there we are, that's my basic white sourdough. If you like your crust to be a little bit softer, you can wrap the loaf in a tea towel. So bear in mind it's still a bit hot, and that will just contain a little bit of the moisture, the steam from the loaf, and just make it a little bit softer on the crust. The banneton you can just leave to dry. I don't ever wash mine. You can just leave it to air dry, or you can just pop it in the oven with the door open just to sort of properly dry out. But yes, we've now got our loaf. You do need to leave it to cool. You can't really sort of jump straight into it while it's still hot, because it needs to kind of, the steam in it will continue to cook the loaf. So we just need to leave it until it's properly cooled down, and then I can show you what it looks like inside. So the loaf has cooled off now, and so I'm just going to cut it open. Now I quite like my sourdough to have a kind of quite an even texture, not really big holes. So that's what we've got here. So let me see if I can. There we go, so a few bigger holes here, and the texture will vary quite a bit, but that, I don't like too many holes, otherwise everything just falls through your taste. But you can see it's quite nice and soft and squidgy. A nice sort of airy, light texture. So that's my loaf. So I'm going to have some lunch. I just want to talk briefly about the cloche, which, so this is like, it's ceramic, and it's kind of like an oven within an oven. So basically you put this in to heat up in your oven, and then it creates a much more even temperature for your loaf to bake in. And also it retains the steam, so it makes the loaf a little bit softer, and it saves having to sort of chuck water around in your oven, which is what you would have to do to create some steam. So I use this all the time. My oven isn't particularly brilliant, and I'm sure it has sort of hot spots and things like that. So that's what I use to bake my loaf, and it's called a la cloche. And yeah, you can get metal ones, but this is a ceramic one. But I would recommend one of those. You can improvise with just a big crock pot, a big Le Creuset pan, or something which is large, this sort of volume, and with a lid that you can close the loaf into. But yeah, there we go, there's my sourdough. It always astonishes me how early in what we perceive to be the summer, trees start to get ready for autumn. Here are elderberries, green admittedly, but it seems like only yesterday I was making elderflower gin. Hawthorn berries. These also be red and providing some autumn food. for the thrushes. Holly berries. And some brambles behind. There we have a little hazelnut. Hopefully that'll manage to ripen before the grey squirrels get to it, before it's mature. These are spindleberries, so at the moment they're green, but they'll go a really lovely kind of dusky pink. And look very pretty against the green foliage. Now, the odd thing is I've hardly seen any acorns. There's some galls, so there's a marble gall. There's an acorn, but you can see it's going to not turn into an acorn. It's got that sort of weird structure to it, which is a gall. So, and these two, so that's a knopper gall, and that one there as well. So basically that's where a little wasp lays an egg, and as it does so in the acorn, in the leaf bud, and as it does so it creates a little home in this sort of mutated acorn. But obviously it means it doesn't produce an acorn. These acorns look a bit more promising because they're not, don't look like they've been got at by the gall wasps. It's a selection of leaf galls, but the acorns don't seem particularly affected. And last but certainly not least, conkers. This tree always seems to have quite smooth conkers. It's a pink flowered one. I don't know if that makes any difference. Last year we had lots and lots of conkers and acorns, but this year doesn't look like it's going to be quite so prolific. So maybe last year was a mast year, which is where you get lots and lots, and this year isn't going to be quite as productive. That concludes the vlog. Hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you next week.